How many of you would agree that we live in a divided country? And it's getting more and more divided. And some of you are angry because the America you grew up with seems to be going away. And there's a new kind of America. And there might be something in you that wants to retaliate, to do something crazy, to, I don't know, display your hostilities toward these things. But let me just say this to you. The context in which the Sermon on the Mount was written, well, it makes America look like the most peaceful and united country by comparison. Because the nation that Jesus was talking to, his disciples on that mountain that day, were living under Roman occupation. It would be like the Russians moved in and took over everything. And we had to ask them permission to blow our noses. And we were under total dominance. And we were under an ideology that none of us agreed with. And they were pagans beyond pagan. And they are now in God's holy land. And they're doing whatever they want. Let me ask you this. Would that cause you to go like, we got to get together and do something? Right? Well, that's exactly the climate. And so this morning I want to talk about the laws of non-retaliation. Because this is really big in God's kingdom. I could have given it the subtitle, Love Always Wins Over Evil. It always does. So we're angry, we're frustrated, but the question is, what are the weapons of our warfare? How do we fight against injustices? So the first point here is Jesus deals with the human desire for justification or justice through retaliation. That's where he's going to go with this. He says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. You've heard that said. Now, it's important to say that Jesus is quoting the Bible here. He's quoting Exodus 21. He's also quoting Deuteronomy 19. The Bible clearly says that there is a justice that God requires, and it is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, why is Jesus dealing with his disciples personally? We'll get to that in a minute. This, by the way, is the sixth antithesis, and this one here is the fifth one, and it's retaliation. So he's going to go against their feelings of retaliation. There's a climate of retaliation, and Jesus is going to say, you've heard it said this, but I'm going to tell you something entirely different. Now, this is not to contradict a rabbinical school like the other antitheses were, because every Jew, including the rabbis, knew that this eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth was something done in civil court. In other words, you would go to court, and the punishment fit the crime. That's the way God's civil court would operate under the judges. It was never meant to be a personal thing where you as a person could take somebody's eye if they took yours or two. So everybody knew it, every rabbi knew it, but here's why Jesus told his disciples this. Because there was a climate in Israel that can only be described as a zealot mindset. How many of you have heard of the zealots in the Bible? Remember Barabbas? He was a zealot. He was let go because he would actually fight against Rome where Jesus did nothing. And what does it mean to be a zealot? It means that you have a zeal for righteousness. And so, because you have a zeal for righteousness, there is a political nationalism. You are going to rise up and defend your nation. And especially for the Jews, because they believed that God had given them this nation. So they believed that God alone was king, and they believed that this Roman rule was a total blasphemy. So sure, we can fight against the Romans, because they are being blasphemous by taking over land. So therefore, violence against oppression was considered righteous. How many people have heard this even taught in evangelical churches today? This is out there because it follows this idea that God is most concerned about a national thing. It needs to be defended. They all believed that it was God's will for Israel to be restored. And the role models for this zeal for righteousness were King David, who went up against God's enemies, and especially they liked Elijah, because Elijah would bring down fire from heaven and destroy all of God's enemies. So this was the worldview that was so strongly held and supported by the Jews of the day that the entire nation is going to be destroyed in 70 AD, just a handful of years after Jesus is crucified. Why? Because they retaliated against the Romans. And when you retaliate against the Roman Empire, you lose. And they lost. They lost their nation. They lost their temple. They lost everything because they could not retaliate against their enemies. How deep was this burning desire? If you remember Jesus' disciples, John and James, who were called the sons of thunder because they were part of this zealot community, that when Jesus makes them his disciples, there's one point where they're in Samaria, and the Samaritans aren't paying attention, aren't listening, and John or James, one of them says this, Lord, wilt thou command fire to come down from heaven and consume, even as Elias did? Yeah, let's burn them up. They're not listening. Do you remember what Jesus said to them? Well, first of all, he turns to them and he rebukes them and he says this, you do not know the manner of spirit you're in. This is not God's spirit. God's spirit is not one of retaliation against enemies. This is a human spirit. It may even be a demonic spirit, but it's not God's spirit. So here's what he says. For the Son of Man has come not to destroy man's life, but what? To save him. Any ideology, any theology that requires us to destroy our enemies is not coming from heaven. It is a human or even demonic, but our desire as God's church, as his representative, is to save life. Can we save the life of our enemies? We better. Should we pray for the salvation of people we disagree with? We better. So, here is Jesus' position on retaliation against evil, and it is not something you're going to like. You've probably read it before, but I'm going to go into greater detail. He says, I'm going to say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. Think about this a second. Somebody's evil, they come at you, don't resist them. Lie down. Is that the American spirit? No, it's not the American spirit. Is it the human spirit? No, it's not the human spirit. Is it the Holy Spirit? Yeah. You're going to require a lot of the Holy Spirit to do these things. And let me tell you, Jesus goes into 4 different examples, so you won't misunderstand what he's trying to say about resisting evil. And all of these things deal with, listen to me, an assault on human dignity and an assault and violation of justice. Evil is coming at us 100 miles an hour, and it wants to take something from us. When he talks about turning the other cheek, you're going to see it talks about dignity. There's something, an evil force wanting to take away your dignity. Then evil comes at us and wants to take away our possessions. Then evil comes at us and wants to take away our freedom. Then evil comes against us and wants to take against. I'm going to talk about our prerogatives because it needs a little explanation in the light of what Jesus is doing here. This is all about what Paul taught in Romans. Believers, never revenge yourself. But who are we to leave room for? The wrath of God. You see, all these principles are absolutely crazy if there's not a God in heaven. This is totally the wrong thing to do. To let evil be evil if there's not a God in heaven. If it wasn't written that vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. How many people know God knows how to repay evil? Including the evil that is done to you personally. So you have a choice. You can retaliate against it, or you can let your good shepherd. See, Jesus says, I am your shepherd. You're not going to want for anything. Therefore, you don't have to fear evil. I love this passage in Psalm 23 because it tells us not to fear any evil. Why? Listen to this verse and understand what it means. It says, why don't we fear evil? For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. What is a rod and staff in the arms of Jesus? See the wolf over there? Who do you think he's protecting us against? Right over there. If he's the shepherd, and he's got a staff, and he's got a stick, they're not going to get it. Let him be the shepherd, and you don't have to want for anything. These 4 areas that are being spoken about, dignity being removed from you, Your possessions being removed from you. Your freedoms being removed from you. Your provocations being. You don't have to fear any of these things because man cannot take from you what only God can give. What do I mean by that? We'll see. We don't fear any evil because no man can take from us things that only God can give us. Who gives us our dignity? I said, who gives us our dignity? If the whole world hates you, you're not hated by heaven. So let's look at these things. Because that's where Jesus is going. He's talking about, first of all, evil has come to take away your dignity. How are you going to respond to it? And it's all about the slap. He says, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him also the other. Now, most people are right-handed. Who can I slap here? Jason? I'm not going to try to slap him. So just imagine, that's his left cheek right there, right? Right? If I'm going to slap somebody on their right cheek, that's what it says, right cheek, and I'm a right-handed person, what do I have to do? Backhand them. And that's exactly what Jesus is talking about. If you're gonna get them on this cheek, you're gonna have to backhand them. And that was a clear and common way of insulting somebody. The only thing I can say to this is that this backhanded slap was so bad that there was a different penalty. If somebody slapped you in the face, that was one penalty. If they backhanded you, it was twice the penalty. And it's not talking about physical violence toward you. It's talking about disrespect to you. I've heard idiot atheists who knew nothing of this principle. Oh, Christians are sadomasochists because if you slap them on one side, they're called to turn the other cheek. Well, that's just a form of sadomasochism. This wasn't a painful thing. This was a disrespectful thing. And I started thinking, what is equivalent today to the backhanded slap? And because I watch a lot of football, I came up with this as the equivalent of backhanded slap. By the way, let me just cover this real quickly. It's the ultimate sign of disrespect. It's related to total contempt for a person. There's double penalty. And what would be the modern equivalent? If you watch a lot of football, this. You can't do that to another man. Hey, these guys are killing each other on the football field. That's perfectly fine. Slamming each other, that's okay. But you don't do that. Because you ever see when these two guys are going back and forth, a little trash talking going on, and one guy goes ballistic, and everybody says, why is he going so crazy? I mean, he's throwing punches, and everybody's like, that's just nuts. Why is he doing this? He's going to get thrown out of the game. And then you find out later, he did it because the guys spit on him. And what do we all do? Oh, well, I get it now. Spit on, well, okay, now I understand it. Nobody does that. I mean, anything's justifiable if you get spit on. That's what Jesus is talking about. The backhand. Somebody totally, completely disrespects you, insults you, treats you with some contempt. Remember Jesus, he went through all of this. And he said to us, listen, the path that I took was one that led to death on a cross, led to total, complete humiliation, led to persecution, spitting on me, total disrespect for me. And unless you pick up your cross, you can't follow. What is Jesus trying to tell us? If you're a Christian, you're going to get disrespected. If you're a Christian, you're going to get persecuted. Listen to what Jesus did. He gave his back to those who strike. He gave his cheek to those who pulled out the beard. He hid out his face from disgrace. He took it. He took it without retaliation. And believe me, Jesus said he had a legion of angels. He could have retaliated. But he didn't. But he's telling you, you're going to pick up that cross, right? You're going to act like this, right? You're going to be like me, right? Because you can't do this, don't come. If you want to be human about it, don't come. Because let me just tell you, he was despised, he was rejected, he was a man of sorrow, he was acquainted with grief. Men hid their faces from him, he was despised, and they esteemed him not. If you're looking for esteem in this world, don't become a true believer. Jesus was treated with total and complete contempt. But, as we see, he suffered, but he didn't threaten. He continued to trust himself to who? To him who judges rightly. In other words, he said, Father, you will do what is right to vindicate. He was reviled, but he did not revile in return. All of this is part of Jesus. And then he tells us, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. Get ready. Then I know what this is. This is the life of this dyslexic. That's the way I see paper. That's the way I see images. A little hard to read. And sometimes I ask God, because I feel every Sunday morning I get up here to publicly embarrass myself by trying to read when I can't really read the letters very well. And I sometimes say to God, it'd be better if you called somebody smarter, more intelligent. And God says, I don't need you or anybody. You just go and be obedient. Last week, I'm using this as an example. Last week I put up a slide. I don't know how many of you caught it. In which I spelled vowels entirely wrong. See, oaths and vows should be rare. My wife pointed this out to me, after the message, because she loves me. And I thought about our visitors who are here. I thought about them going home in the car and going, I don't know. Oaths and vows, did you see that? Oaths and vows? He's the pastor, oaths and vows? I can't sit under that kind of stuff. Dyslexic. You right? Yeah. I try my best. It's not a matter of not trying. I really try. I'm putting my messages together like 15 minutes before the sermon. Because God's showing me new things, so sometimes I get it wrong. But listen, I thought to myself, not against me. Any persecution I would get because of a weakness, any insults, any contempt that would be directed to me, do I have any idea what the Apostle Paul went through? What did the Apostle Paul do before he was saved? He murdered Christians. He murdered Christians. How would you like to stand up here where everywhere you go, everybody's with him? Hey, I don't know what to do. He's a murderer. Not a murderer. He murdered Christians. And Paul got used to it. He said this, I have become content with my weakness, with insults, with hardships, with persecution, with calamity, because I know that when I'm at my weakest, then he is at his strongest. Paul understood how God could take the evils and the revilers and turn it around. So he said, when revile, we bless. When persecuted, we endure. When slander, we entreat. And then he goes on to even say this, we have become and still are like the scum of the world, a refuge of all things. I am treated like the scum of the earth, like a refuge, like garbage in all things. Jesus is saying, no. You take whatever contempt, whatever despising they do, you take that slap, and you don't retaliate in any way. Next point he talks about is when evil comes to take away your possessions. How many people have had this happen? Probably not many. Evil comes. Jesus says this, if anyone would sue you and take your strength. Anybody here ever been sued? Oh, good. No one has ever been sued. You know what they're coming for when they sue you? Your money. Whether it's the lawyer you pay for, whatever. I've seen good, just gentle Christians go ballistic when somebody tried to take their money. You know, one Christian who, some kids went over and stole some stuff out of his house. And instead of calling the cops, he went to that person's house with a gun. No one's going to take my stuff. Not my watch. And you watch a nice gentle Christian become John Wayne in the Wild West. Or maybe Bad Boy, I don't know. You ain't going to take my money. I'm going to fuck you. No, leave! Nobody messing with my money. I don't know why I went into that. I said, "Look, usually I do the dumbed down self guy. I don't know what was happening there. I don't know what I was going on. If anyone would steal you and take your turnip, what? This is a common practice. You went to law, you would give your turnip up as a form of covering whatever the offense was. But there was a law that said that nobody, under any conditions, could, they could take your turnip, but they couldn't take your cloak as a pawn. Nobody would take your cloak. Why? Because your inner garment, you had many of them. You only had one, and by the way, a cloak is like a coat. You could never take anybody's jacket. Because the jacket was what they used in life to keep warm. And Jesus says, go ahead, give me the jacket. They want to turn it, give them a jacket. Give them everything. So you sleep naked. What in the world is going on here? Evil has come to take away my possessions, and God says, instead of me kind of fighting back or coming against them or getting my lawyer and we're going to go to battle and all, he tells me, just double up on the good. What in the name? So they want one possession. I give them twice as many possessions. This is what you're telling me. This is a good idea. It would be like that guy I was telling about. Instead of when they came and stole, he would take some of his other possessions and give them. Instead of bringing a gun, he would have brought more possessions and give them to them. What's going on here? Well, Jesus is talking about how good ultimately defeats evil. And what he's really talking about here is very subtle. He's talking about turning the tables. And you go, how? This is. Imagine, you go to court for just the inner turnip, and now the guy's gives you everything, and he's standing there, bare-chested, in the middle. What do you think the people are thinking of that guy right there? The guy walking away with his back. What do you think they think about him? It ain't good. And what do they think about this? I wasn't going to tell this story. I really wasn't. But I have to tell it because it just fits so incredibly perfectly. I was involved in broadcasting when I was in my 20s, and I got the program directors of all the stations I worked for. They were secular stations, and letting me on Sunday morning play any type of music and say anything I wanted. So they gave me Sunday morning to do that. So one of the little segments we would do is we would go to a mall and we'd ask questions. Questions like, if you could ask God one question, what would you ask? Get a whole variety of opinions. Might open up a door to evangelize. Anyway, we were doing this outside of a college town, and I wasn't aware it was a college town. So we came across a guy who looked like a professor, because he was a professor. And we asked, hey, you can ask God one question, what would you ask him? He just looked right at us. I don't believe in God. Okay, no, that's real problem. Then he says this guy. He's all Christians are hypocrites. And my buddy and I look at him, well, we're not hypocrites, we're in the mall, we're going to try to do it. He goes, I'll prove it to you. All right. He goes, what does the